Uh, Welcome to Taj Hashmi's reading History and Culture. As promised, I would I will be talking to you about history and cultural issues in South Asia, Middle East, and beyond. Today, I'm touching on a very important theme: imperialism and neocolonialism since the 18th century, because the countries I refer to most frequently, South Asia, Middle East, Southeast Asia, they are post-colonial countries. And I also talk about Europe and United States of America, and sometimes even Canada and Australia. They are also closely associated with the history of imperialism and neo-imperialism. It's pertinent to our understanding of modern day's problems in the light of imperialism and neo-imperialism. We need to understand both. What is imperialism and what is neo-imperialism? So as I begin, imperialism, uh, sorry, before I begin, I highlight one thing about my lectures, which will be mostly off the cuff. I won't have detailed dates and names and references to make it more personal, and it's more or less like a coffee table discussion on serious issues in a very casual way. So I assure you, I won't burden you with lots of information, names, and data. So it's more or less today I'm talking about imperialism and neo-imperialism in our world. Imperialism is as old as human civilization. Some imperialists plundered distant lands, some occupied distant lands permanently. Some managed to do it for several centuries. There has been intense competitions and warfare between rival imperialists and the empire builders, colonial powers throughout history, who subjugated people, colonized them, and some of them just came and plundered them, like Alexander the Great or Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni. Many Pakistanis are very proud of Sultan Mahmud, who invaded India 17 times. But as a Muslim, I'm very embarrassed to even mention Sultan Mahmud as a Muslim, let alone as a great leader. So there are examples abound about invasions, permanent occupation, and occupation of countries for several centuries. Like Muslims occupied Spain and Portugal for almost 7 centuries. Ottomans occupied Eastern Europe for several centuries. And we know that Western Europeans, Britain, France, Netherlands, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, among others, occupied countries in Asia Pacific world, Africa, and Latin America for several centuries. And some parts of the world that is very pertinent to understanding, like United States, what is United States of America today, or Canada today, and even Spain, they are settler colonies. Europeans came, invaded, rather, occupied, and somehow directly or indirectly annihilated the indigenous population, and they brought people from Europe to settle them in this new world, new worlds of North and South America. You'll find that most of these countries are white majority. And in some of the countries like United States of America and Canada, you hardly see the indigenous or aborigine people. Many of them died of pestilence, certain diseases which they had no immunity to, and many of them are simply slaughtered by white European settlers. It has been very evident in Australia, where I lived for about 7 years. I studied there, did my PhD there, and I came across a handful of Aboriginal people, mostly drunk most of the time, alcoholic, marginalized, jobless, angry, bitter. Same thing has happened to Hawaii as well. White people have become quite dominant there, and original inhabitants, although they are still in the majority, but they have remained marginalized for 700 years since America occupied it, or since the white settlers started occupying Hawaii. I also lived there to experience these things. Anyway, I have earmarked only historical periods because people in ancient times migrated from one region to another. They occupied many countries, like the Aryans came to India, and now they are called as the Brahmins and Kshatriyas, the priests and warriors. They are mostly outsiders. They have occupied India 2,000 years back, and they have been indigenized. They call themselves Indians, Brahmins, but they are also outsiders. But there is a vicious campaign against Muslims who came long after the Aryans had come here, and they are being considered as foreigners, and even indigenous converts. Indian Muslims are called descendants of Babur, or Babur ki aulad. So to understand the present problems across the world between so-called indigenous and foreigners, that is very evident in India and elsewhere, in America and Europe, America and Latin America and Australia. White people somehow, the dominant narrative is they have been here in this land because it was empty, barren, as it is all the time we hear from Palestine. Israelis say somehow this is our promised land, and so when we came, we didn't see any Palestinians. Golda Meir, former Israeli prime minister, said, "Who are the Palestinians? I'm not aware of it." So to understand these issues, what is imperialism and colonialism, unless we understand these themes, we won't understand what is going on in Palestine as a whole, or in Gaza in particular. And the white settlers, mostly European Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, they try to portray a totally convoluted false history that, oh, they are the original inhabitants of this land, and they were away for about 2,000 years. See, in the meanwhile, many people, Jews, they were converted into Christians, and many Christians are converted into Muslims when the Muslims occupied this land. So the DNA of the Christians, Jews, and Muslims in Palestine are more or less the same, come from the same root. So they are the same people. But somehow European Jews with blue eyes and blonde hair, somehow many of them don't look like Semitic, claim that they are the original inhabitants of this land. So this is a new type of colonialism which started after the end of the First World War in 1919. And so we need to understand what's going on in modern day India and Israel, and even in some white-dominated countries like US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. So there is sort of denial of history. Rights of the Aborigines were taken, and history also was usurped. A new history was written. So we need to have another narrative of history to understand the truth. Unless we understand the truth, unless we understand our past, we are doomed to be enslaved by outsiders or by alien ideas and falsehood. So that's why I have earmarked what happened since 18th century. So I have narrowed the scope of my deliberation on imperialism to the understanding of Western imperialism with some comparative appraisals of the colonizers, imperialist invaders, and the colonized people and their countries, mainly in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Pacific Islands, Australia, and New Zealand in particular. Nevertheless, America, United States, and Canada are very much in our focus. These are settler colonies. Indigenous people have been marginalized, wiped out, so now the settlers are in the majority. But in British India or in Dutch Indonesia or elsewhere, Malaya, Singapore, the white settlers were in the minority, and Indians, Indonesians, Malays, they remained the majority in these lands, unlike what happened in Australia, America, and Canada. So invasions of countries started, as we know of some history, in the historic period, not the prehistoric period. Alexander, the Aryans, Byzantine Greeks, Sassanid Iranians, Arabs, Mongols, West Europeans, such as Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, English, French, Belgians, Swedish, Danish, all these people, nations, had links with imperialism, invasions, and occupation of foreign lands. For example, Sweden occupied Norway. Even Norway was a Swedish colony. So Germans and Italians are latecomers. Until mid-19th century, late 19th century, there were no countries called Italy and Germany. So they didn't have the opportunity to occupy distant lands in North America, Asia, Latin America, and Africa or Australia or the Pacific Islands. That's why we see the latecomers, Germans and Italians, they tried to build empires in late 19th and early 20th centuries up to the Second World War. They tried in vain. And we know the history of Germany. They occupied some territories in Africa, but finally they lost the wars to fellow Europeans, mostly colonial powers, imperialists who defeated another would-be imperialists, that is Germans and Italians. So First World War and Second World War could, as I see it, could be described as wars between well-entrenched imperialists with the aspirant imperialist powers like Germany, Japan, Italy. And so latecomers lost First and Second World Wars. And tragically, unfortunately, we often glorify imperialists and ruthless invaders from Alexander to Genghis Khan and Napoleon. And all of you are aware that Alexander is often referred to as Alexander the Great. What's so great about Alexander? He came from Macedonia, a small kingdom in what is Greece today, and invaded one country after another. In Eastern Europe, Egypt, then he came to Iran, and then from there to India, and then went back. On his way back, he died in Babylon. Alexander died in his 40s. But what we don't hear, what we don't tell the posterity and students, that Alexander came, his soldiers raped women, his soldiers plundered people, killed ruthlessly, and they plundered and came up to Punjab, and they did not go beyond down to the lower Ganges because soldiers were tired, they want to go back, so they went back. So there is nothing glorious or great about Alexander or Genghis Khan or Napoleon. We know both Genghis Khan and Napoleon gave law. Genghis Khan's Yasa, his law code, and Napoleon's code Napoleon. But giving law and order to continue their empires doesn't make someone great. So there was nothing so great about Genghis Khan and Napoleon. We know about the barbaric killing sprees by Genghis Khan, but very little is known about Napoleon. Napoleon's life story, his rise and fall up to the end of his career and up to Waterloo. We know about that. But how many millions Napoleon killed? How many millions Genghis Khan killed? Remain out of focus. We can assume Napoleon had no reason to invade Russia and kill so many Russians. Genghis Khan has no reason to conquer Central Asia and China and kill people. So even as a Muslim, we are often proud of Muhammad bin Qasim, Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, and then even Musa bin Nusair and Tariq bin Ziyad. So many Muslim children, sons, kids are named after Muhammad bin Qasim, Sultan Mahmud. So many of Mahmuds are there. Then Musa and Tariq, very common. They are heroes in Pakistan. Mahmud Ghazna, and Mahmud Ghori, Muhammad Ghori, who invaded occupied India, Delhi. There was nothing great about their invasions. They were imperialists, period. They came in the name of spreading Islam. Sultan Mahmud plundered Somnath temple and other places and plundered wealth from Indians, Hindus, which has still remained a stigma for Muslims and which has still remained a scoring point for Modi and his Hindutva adherents, that these Muslims in India today are descendants of Mahmud and Muhammad Ghori and Babur and Aurangzeb. They were all foreigners. They occupied land and they ran it. As Aryans were invaders, so were Mughals, so were Delhi Sultans, so were Sultan Mahmud and Muhammad bin Ghori. I know these statements are quite unpalatable, disturbing. Timurland. Timur had no reason to invade countries. He was a Muslim, but he did not invade countries for the sake of Islam. Islam had no remote connections with what Sultan Mahmud, Muhammad Ghori, Muhammad bin Qasim, or Tariq, Musa bin Nusair, Tariq bin Ziyad, or Aurangzeb did to Indians and others. So people are very biased. We are by birth programmed to be biased and biased against others, prejudiced against others, and it is always a game of we versus them. You go to talk to some English men or women, they will always say, we gave civilization to Africa and Asia, we brought telegraph, We brought railways, we brought motor cars, we built good roads and highways, English education. So we were very benign people. Of late, Indian politician, Congress leader, and writer Shashi Tharoor has lambasted that. And before Shashi Tharoor, Arsida Ramesh Chandra Dutt, the economic history of India, he wrote in the early 20th century. He told us all about how the Britishers occupied and plundered our land. So there is nothing so great about uh, Muhammad bin Qasim or the Aryans, Arabs, and Ottoman Turks. Ottoman Turks occupied half of Europe, Eastern Europe, and they have been kicked out of Europe from Greece, Bulgaria, Romania. If you go there and talk about uh, Turks, if you go to Greece, Athens, and tell someone about Constantinople, or which is now Istanbul, they would say, it belonged to us. It belongs to us, or it belonged to us. So they are not very pleased with what Sultan Muhammad II did in 1453, occupied Istanbul, or Constantinople as it was known in those days, Kustuntunia to Arabs, Turks, and Iranians, and Muslims in general. Whether you call it Constantinople, Kustuntunia, or Istanbul, the fact remains that the city, the place, did not belong to the Turks. They were not, it was not a Muslim city. And there is no point in citing some hadiths, which are fake, 99%, that our great Prophet Muhammad, wanted to glorify whoever occupies Istanbul. Istanbul isn't any ancestral property of the Arabs. It was never, it is never, and it will never be a legitimate territory for Muslims. But these things happen. Something happens as fate accompli, which has been done is done, so no more reverting to what happened before 1453, one may surmise. But as a historian, student of history, I believe that certain invasions could be legitimized and certain cannot be. Certain invasions can be uh, stamped as it is a fait accompli, and if the people of those cities or those places think that no, we don't belong to this country, which is now our master country of our masters, then we see nationalism evolve there. I talked to some Aborigines in Australia. They all the time say, this land belongs to us, not to the white invaders. So any discourse on imperialism and colonialism is bound to give two sides of the story. One, the story told by the invaders, and another story nourished and nurtured by the invaded, occupied people of the occupied territory. So the narratives in favor of invaders like Alexander, Sultan Mahmud, and Napoleon are subject to ignorance, bias, and prejudice. Nationalist and ideological prejudice have been the reasons behind such blind glorifications of invaders and colonizers. And what is a, what is a very favorite theme of mine is the false consciousness and cultural hegemony. False consciousness is aroused by the invaders, and by telling a concocted story, they establish their hegemony or acceptance They legitimize their rule, their presence among the bulk of the population. This has been going on for thousands of years. So faith and politics-based myopia and prejudice as Aryan, Hindu, Muslim, Arab, Turk, European, Christian, American, Russian, etc. are behind the concoctions of history. And history is not just a dead narrative of old dead people, but history is very much part of our day-to-day consciousness. What we are today, what we will be tomorrow is, is molded by history. That's why I'm narrating this, a narrative on imperialism and colonialism. And I am not going to prolong my discussions on these introductory chapters, introductory part of the story. Concoction, concoction of history, or the truth being the first victim of invasions and occupation have been the norm. So in the discourse of narration about imperialism and colonialism, what becomes the main victim? Not the people who have been killed, of course they have been, but his truth. Truth has been the main victim of all invasions and occupations. No wonder Alexander is referred to as Alexander the Great. Napoleon is never cursed as Hitler. There was hardly or no difference between Napoleon and Hitler. Mind it, both Napoleon and Hitler invaded Russia. And as one historian, Kettleby, who wrote modern European history, I read more than 50 years back, I still remember one phrase, one line, that both Napoleon and Hitler committed the gravest mistakes of their lives, leaving England unconquered. Both of them invaded Russia, and their rule, their reign were doomed to be a failure. Both Hitler and both Napoleon and Hitler lost mainly because they invaded Russia. So it was an uh, attempted imperialist quest. Both Napoleon and Hitler did. So Napoleon and Hitler failed, but some of them succeeded in occupying new territories and became great empire builders. So to close this chapter today, we human beings are mostly prejudiced, biased creatures, narcissistic, narcissistic liars, hypocrites, and misled believers who love to glorify their ancestors as just, honest, and benevolent. They all the time say, oh, we came and we enlightened. We Muslims also say, we came and converted them into Muslims by occupying their land, by abducting their women. But this is what they don't say. By abducting their women, by enslaving the local people, and by enjoying the best things in those lands. Only we hear that we came, we converted them into Muslims, so we saved them from hellfire. Christian invaders also say that, oh, we went to Africa, Asia, Latin America, we all converted them to Christians. Now they know Jesus Christ is the real God. So we have been so benign to them as we saved them from hellfire. So there's a saying in Africa that when they came, they had the Bible in their hand. And now we have the Bible and they have our land. So this is from South Africa or Zimbabwe. I think probably Zimbabwe. Mugabe possibly said this. I may be wrong. I don't have the reference. But when they came, they had the Bible in their hands. And now we have the Bible and they have our land. This is in sum the effect of imperialism and colonialism. So I will, in my next lecture, I will talk about Arab and Ottoman conquests, and more on West European conquest of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So, with this, I end the first part of my introductory lecture on imperialism and colonialism, and I promise that I will give a few more lectures on this, and then I will also introduce my books. I'll read my books with you. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.